All right. Okay, we're recording, and Bob, you have it.
Excellent. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:05. Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States
of America
and to the
to the
republic
republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with liberty
and
and
justice for all.
all.
All right, I'd like to welcome everybody. Thank everybody for coming tonight. Looks like we're going to have a pretty good turnout. Would any of the board members like anything removed from the consent agenda? All right, hearing none. Do we have a motion to accept and approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Heidi,
Seconded?
second by Ann. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I can't see it. Is oh, Jackie's actually, I think Jackie's on, but she's muted. Are you there, Jackie?
We lost her, it looks like.
Okay. All right, then motion passes 4-0. Moving on to the next order of business presentation. You're going to do the budget presentation right now, correct?
Yeah, we're gonna do part of the presentation. Here. There's Jackie. So if I could just remind folks who are just logged in or in the process of logging in to please mute your microphones to there so we don't pick up your background noise and such and hear whatever you're doing as things are going on. So the presentation tonight on the budget is really for purposes of clarity. It's we've talked about a couple different things in the past 3 weeks, and it's looking to it's just looking to make sure everyone understands this is what the board is voting on tonight. This is what is included and not included in the voting for this evening, and what is coming to the voters here through the absentee ballot. Because a couple of weeks ago we were talking about pending cuts and pending reductions, and as a kind of a preparatory work toward the what ifs that are coming down the road. Well, the governor's office continues to hold out on basically saying these are the cuts we're going to make or we're not going to make, because they're really waiting on the federal funds to try to prevent any of these cuts from happening. Today's press conference, right at the end, at a question to a reporter, said that we would find out some of that information in a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks is too late for us to act on it. So we need to, as we decided at the last meeting, we need to be able to act on the information that we have and then wait until we get new information for whatever those reductions might look like, or if there are any, depending on what the federal funding looks like, before we really make any movements. So tonight's budget it goes back to really at the end of April. It was where our last set was before we really had the deep concerns about the deep cuts that may be pending and coming our way here, within a month or so. This is the budget that will go to the voters, and here's everything that includes. So as difficult as it may be, we got to put last week or last meeting out of our mind a little bit, because that was more of a what if meeting. And did we want to go there? Or if not, where do we want to go? This is what's going on the ballot. This is what's in the newsletter. And this is what I'll talk about in the public hearing. And this is what folks will be voting on coming up here by June the 9th. This budget is proposed at just over $14.1 million. It's an increase of just over $224,000. It's an overall budget increase of 1.62%, with a tax levy increase of 1.95%. this does not have any of our new ideas, our pre-COVID conversations, doesn't include those ideas except information on the restorative justice. If you remember, we talked about a director of curriculum and instruction, and we talked about additional clerical support in the business office. Those items are not in this budget. The items that are in, however, and there are no other staff reductions in this budget. So it's also a full-time CSE chair. It's almost the earth science teacher is in this position, in this budget as well. So this is everything before we started talking about reductions. But here, however, in this budget, we had already done quite a bit of reducing in our expenditures in anticipation of what was coming. So material supplies and most equipment kept at zero. This still does have the swing in it for the CSE for OT and PT. The CSE chairperson is held the current position. I do take it back on the earth science. We did remove it out of this budget. Funds included from pending WASIA negotiations were removed. All of our non-union salaries are held flat. Anticipated breakage from retirements was removed, and there is again no action on pending items on any of those pending items. So this is the dollars and cents that is there. There are no reductions to any current programs or to any current staffing. All of that is retained in this budget. Here's a look at the state revenue. Everything is pretty much flat, as you can see, as you kind of look down the change column. Couple places where there's an exception to that, and that's where our expense-based aids are. So when you look at our excess private and public aid, that is a pretty big increase. That's a pretty big increase there, but that's based on our special education needs. We had a transportation, that's probably our largest increase this year. And that shows here, and that's based on the number of miles we travel. BOCES, our increases listed here, and that is based on the amount of aidable expenses we push through BOCES to be able to get aid on the expenses that we use in the services that we use through BOCES. Those are the main drivers. There's a little in building aid, but those three items are our main drivers for what our revenue is on the state side. It's all expenditure aid. What we're spending through BOCES, what aid we get back on our transportation, and then what costs and our excess costs are for our special education population. Our overall increase is just about 2.3% of an increase in aid from the state revenue side of things, or an additional $168,000 from state revenue by itself. On the local side, the tax levy is where we agreed to be at 1.95%, or just under $100,000. There is an anticipation of tuition aid going up, but that's a combination of changes in our tuition rates from last year, and based on what our population is for our non-resident students. You can see pretty much everything else is a negative or flat across the board, just over 2% in an increase here for overall local of 112,000. And those two numbers are what we put together for our overall budget. When we looked at the levy, here is where the levy fits. We have traditionally held just under 2% of the levy, but we actually could have gone as high as 5% this year. But when we look at kind of a community expectation and really the economy of what's going on currently, we felt it was not in our best interest to go above that 2%. And so we're holding it at the 195, and you can see where that's in comparison between our 10-year average and our average since the cap was instituted. So overall, in our overall summary, our revenue increase is just about 1.62%. We've talked about these two lines. That's our summary line from our state. That's our summary from our revenue. This is all of our appropriated fund balance work. Pretty much flat across the board. The exception here is that dollar amount is a little less than it was the year before, as we had planned. So showing where our overall revenue will fall at $14,122,544. I think it's important to note, I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. In our state revenue, there is a pandemic adjustment this year. So when the state did its budgeting, it had it put together a formula anticipating a reduction in aid. And then through some formula, it had said each school is going to lose a certain amount of money. In our case, that's $123,481 initially. They immediately backfilled that money with anticipated federal aid from the CARES, from the CARES monies, which we haven't seen anything of yet. I have a meeting tomorrow, and hopefully to get some more information where that is coming. But since we don't have that money to count on yet, we are not counting on it as revenue in our budget yet. If it does come along, that'll help us offset any costs in the future when the state says it's time to look at some reductions. Any questions on the revenue side before I switch over to the expenditure side? Okay, so looking at the expenditure side, we look at the expenditure side in three ways. That is through the administrative component, through the capital component, and then through the program component. The administrative component is here. It is relatively flat, increasing just under $3,600. You can see everything across the board here. Where it lists and indicates where we've reduced out of each line item, with the exception of some central services and through some legal expenses. Legal expenses is between building project and negotiations and our normal running costs. That's where our legal expenses have increased. Our central services number is a little bit misleading because that's where a lot of our BOCES expenses are. And please remember that BOCES was stuck in an old budget when they'd already done their public hearing, they had already sent out their advertising, and so they were legally stuck in the budget they had presented, which was going to cause this increase for us. Since then, they've done a lot of work to reduce what that budget's going to look like to get it much closer to zero in a result. So we don't expect this number to be there yet, but we expect actually to be lower. We'll know what that number lower is here as I'm going to guess as the school year gets started. Overall, that's our administrative budget. It is I believe it's actually lowest of our three components. The capital component, we can see here, this is actually a reduction this year over the previous year. It gets reduced out in a couple different places. One is operation and maintenance, and that's basically salary and benefits. And we talked about in the last meeting about this $20,000 being transferred to the lunch fund that we are not doing this year, mainly because of the reimbursement money we anticipate getting from all the meals that we're doing this year, which has been quite an increase in the number of meals we have served versus a regular school year. So in that anticipated revenue, we didn't feel we needed to do that transfer and then reduce that out of the capital budget, showing here the budget being just $1,476,578, or a reduction of just over 2%. In the program side, this is where all the programs are. We talk about it a lot. The programs are, this is where the teachers are, this is where the academic program is. So this is the largest budget, and it is so by far in our overall budget. This shows just over a $251,000 increase, or just over 2.25%. We can see in the expenses where the major expenses fall pupil services and total teaching, and total costs. It's salaries, it's benefits, and it's special education costs, which are kind of our staple drivers of increase in this part of the budget, and it's the same, and that's the same for this year. Any questions on the expenditure side of the budget? All of our ballots, please remember, are going to be mail-in. After the board approves the items for the ballot tonight, we go into overdrive and get all the information into our newsletter and approve and ready to go, get our newsletter printed. All of the information gets put to the ballot and sent out to, I think it's Fort Orange Press, so they can begin their work, so they can mail all the ballots out. We can get those out to people as quickly as possible. Once we get the newsletters, we will get those out to people as quickly as possible. We still plan on the public hearing being on June the 2nd at 6 o'clock. That'll be done virtually, where you'll get this basic presentation with a couple a couple variations in there and some chances for some people to ask some questions before the budget. And then the ballots are due back to school in our possession before 5 o'clock on June the 9th, where we will count the ballots. And then on these four propositions, with the fourth being the two board seats that are there in the board seats. Ann is rerunning for her seat, and Mary's seat is currently vacant for the upcoming election, which will lead to which will start with a write-in process. And then after the write-in process plays its way out, if there is no person to fill that vacancy, then the board will have its options of either calling for a special election or appointing, but that's only after the write-in process takes place. The one piece that we have to talk about that we don't like talking about is about what happens if a budget fails. In the state, if this were a normal year, we wouldn't be talking about this. We'd be voting tonight because this was actually the original budget vote for the state. In a regular year, if a budget fails, school boards have a couple options available to them. One is to revote with changes to the budget. And that can be any changes. That can be make the budget larger. That could be make the budget smaller. It also can put the budget back out to voters without any change whatsoever. That is option one. And option two. Or option three is go to a contingency budget. If you go to a contingency budget, there are some restrictions. Like you have to put a cap on administrative costs. We already meet that cap with our current budget, so there wouldn't require any additional adjustments there. Restrictions to the tax levy to increase to the previous year. Last year, we went out at 195, so we are already at 195, so we already meet that criteria to begin with. And it does put some limits on expenses for equipment, which we would have to remove. You can see here that the difference below is, I think it's like $48,000. It's close to $50,000 for what the contingency would be if we went through what we proposed versus what is contingent in the budget. With all that being said, we currently have no guidance on what happens if the budget fails on the 9th of June. Normally, there is a time frame put into place where it goes through another 3-week process, where the second vote for the boards happens about June 9th. It happens about mid-June. This year, there is no time for that to happen for a second vote. Unless they do some major changes to what they would look like. Again, and hopefully it's nothing we have to worry about for a second vote, but we are still waiting on guidance from the governor's office on the what if there needs to be a contingent budget. Just speaking a little more, kind of more globally, there are a couple school districts out there that are going way above and beyond what their tax levy limit is. I read one district going out at 19%. Which is above, so they need their supermajority to get that number. If if those budgets don't make it, what options are available to those schools? And we just don't have that guidance at this time. That is the budget that's going to voters. Our current programming, there are no reductions other than what was laid out before. Any of the conversation other than the $20,000 for the lunch fund. Any of the conversations about personnel changes, about program changes, those are not included in this budget. This budget is a budget that if nothing happens, if the federal government comes through and provides all the funding to fill in the $123,000 gap, and we don't have any cuts we have to worry about, that will retain everything we have currently. Everything will stay in place. It's the what if happens in June when the state says, we didn't get federal funds or we didn't get enough federal funds, and then what the reduction would look like from there. But this budget can operate on its own as long as those pending reductions don't.
Followed by pound.
With that, are there any questions?
Dave, I have a question on, so with contingency, so in the scenario where we ended up in contingency and then state aid is decreased by a significant amount, then we would just be limited by that difference between local revenue plus state aid that we would just come down from that contingency number that you just gave down to that number?
Yeah, so if our budget fails and we went to contingency, that's where our operations would be. If the state comes in afterward and says, we need to reduce your aid by 20%, we would start at the contingency number. We would start here and we would start reducing from here.
Any other questions from board members? All right. Well, tonight so our next order of business is public audience. We, in the last couple of meetings, had not had public audience at the beginning. We will tonight. We have a lot of call-ins tonight. And so what we're going to do is we'll go to the public audience. Anybody there's a few people who I can see here who have their cameras on. I guess I want to let everybody know who called in that the WebEx link did not work in the beginning, and I'm not exactly sure what happened, but it is up now. So if anybody would like to go back and come in through the WebEx instead of calling in, and then feel free to do that. Is there anyone? I actually only see a couple people with their cameras on. So we have Marcy and Danny with their cameras on. Any public comment questions from either of you? All right. People are going to have to unmute themselves. I've muted everybody, and I guess I don't know exactly how it worked for me muting people who call in and then them being able to unmute themselves. How does that work?
You have to unmute them for call-in people.
Okay. So anybody whose name's up there must not be a call-in person, correct? Anybody whose name's up there is in through the WebEx, I'm assuming. So I'm gonna unmute a bunch of call-in folks here, and people are going to have to let us know that they have a public comment, because I don't know who most of there's no name associated with most of these folks. So. Lots of people unmuted here. I had muted everybody because we were getting a lot of feedback before. So. All right. So hearing no public comment, and we're going to have a public comment at the end as well. So. We just wanted to give people an opportunity on both ends of the meeting to weigh in or ask questions on anything they've seen so far or anticipate seeing. So, moving on then, communications. There's no communications in the agenda. I'm gonna mute some folks here quick. Somebody's kids just walked into the room. Nothing under old business. Next order of business is business affairs. Business affairs A, do we have a motion, excuse me, to adopt the proposed budget for the 2021 school year in the amount of $14,122,544? That this spending plan be placed before the authorized voters of the district as Proposition 1 on June 9th, 2020.
So moved.
Motion by Heidi.
Second.
Second by Jackie. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Mary, can you just nod so I can see your, yes, okay. All right, excellent. I think I've got everybody then. Motion passes 5-0. Business Affairs B, excuse me, Proposition number 2. Do we have a motion to authorize the lease of 165 passenger school bus and 135 passenger school bus at a cost not to exceed $32,000 annually over a 5-year period?
So moved.
Motion by Heidi.
Second.
Second by Jackie. Discussion. Had a question. So in the event that that Proposition A passes, or number 1 passes and number 2 doesn't, what does that look like transportation wise?
if the budget passes and the bus lease does, then we have the fleet that we have. We'll have to make some arrangements on what we drive, how we drive it.
Clear that the state aid
We just won't be able to lease those buses. So that'll impact our fleet and we'll have to adjust accordingly. It wouldn't have been the first time in the district where we have not kind of kept in our rotation. If this were to happen, we just readjust to the mileage of the buses and try to keep our higher mileage buses off the routes, or keep them to smaller routes until we can get through the year and then try again next year.
All right. Any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Affairs C, proposition number 3. This is a proposition for the Bancroft Library. So we're just a pass through on that money. Do we have a motion to approve that proposition?
So moved.
Motion by Heidi,
Second.
second by Jackie. Discussion. Could you speak just really quickly, just for clarity there? I know that something comes up often, just on that proposition 3 and how we're just a pass through for that money.
Yep, that's exactly it. Each taxing district has a mechanism of which the can garner its own taxes. The town has its own, the school district has its own, but like the public library doesn't have its own mechanism. So the statute allows public libraries to use school districts as their mechanism to make a request to taxpayers for an increase on the tax levy. We are the mechanism for the vote to happen. We do the collections and we distribute the funds to the library upon a successful approval. But it doesn't have anything to do with our budgets. It doesn't have anything to do with, to what the school taxes will look like. We're just merely the mechanism for the public library to ask for and receive funds.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions from the board? All right. All in favor then for the proposition for the appropriation to the Bancroft Library?
So moved. Agreed. Hi. Some more words you would
Yeah.
like.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Business Affairs D, the budget vote, inspector and tellers. Do we have a motion to appoint the following positions for the budget vote?
So moved.
Motion by Heidi,
Second.
second by Mary. Discussion? I have a question on so what is our anticipation of voting machines, or so it's not going to be voting machines, it's going to be paper ballots that come in that will be hand counted?
Yes, we're going to be under a hand count. The machines are not available. The county had made a suggestion at one point to make one machine available that we could take the ballots to them and kind of run them through their machine at the Board of Elections. However, in kind of seeking counsel on this, there was concerns about transporting the ballots off campus and voter fraud concerns and
Chain of custody and yep.
concerns as well. So it will be a hand count on paper. It will be broadcasted. We will have a link set up. So because legally folks have access to being able to see the count. And in this case, anyone who's running for the seat and has the right to be in the room to count ballots. And so we have to be able to make, we have to make accommodations for those folks for the social distancing and et cetera. But for anyone who's looking for a rousing good time, you can watch us open ballots and count them. It's there. But it's, we will be hand counted for the paper ballots this year, unlikely every year that there's a presidential election.
So is that hand counting done by the tellers? Is that who does the hand counting?
Yes.
So my only thought would be, so having hand counted for a number of years, in Rupert as a select board member, you may want more than 3 people. I mean, if we got a big turnout, then it obviously goes quicker with with more counters. So that may be something, and I think we could do that night, right? Do we meet earlier that night?
No, there is no meeting scheduled for that evening.
Okay. Well, that may be something just to think about, because we used to count about 250 ballots with, I don't know, probably 6 to 8 people. And that was very reasonable, but 3, particularly if we got a big turnout, that's just gonna be a lot of counting, because you count them multiple times. Typically we would count them multiple times and then pass the piles to make sure that 2 people counting the same pile came up with the same number. So that's no objection to the 3 we have listed, but you may want some reserves also. So, any other questions?
I have a question. Things we've had a glitch. How do you look at circumventing that problem? Make sure that everybody is able to vote gets a ballot.
Well, we have a different list this time that's in place, so to let us take another look at it. Part of the challenge on the problems with the newsletters don't fall to the school district, it falls to the post office. Last year we had situations where we had sent out the newsletters for delivery, and we would get a report that somebody didn't get a newsletter, but their neighbors did. And that's when we send it out in Salem, that's a bulk mailing. Everyone who's in the Salem district gets one. So some of that's post office. We had some reports too that they sat in a mail box. That's not the right thing. You carry them in, not the mailbox like you get them delivered to, but they use for courier them around, and they sat in Shushan for some time rather than putting into post office boxes. So some of that distribution challenges in ours. Where our challenges still fall is at Jackie's house, where it's their Cambridge mailing address. We don't send them out to everyone in Cambridge because not everyone in Cambridge needs it, and we actually have a mailing list for those folks. This year will be a little bit better because we now have all the Greenwich voters that we'll be able to send folks to, because they hadn't been receiving them in the past either. For that number, there's around 13, 15 people out into Greenwich. So as we've gone through this list, it'll help us get better to it. I'm not going to say we're going to be perfect with it, Mary, but hopefully we can be better this year than we were last.
Thank you.
The other thing I'm anticipating in this, because through no fault of ours, is the challenge of the timing of everything. I would not surprise me if folks get the ballots before they get the newsletters. That wouldn't surprise me at all. So some folks could very easily get the ballot, get it completed, mail it in, and then get the newsletter after that, and then have the public hearing after that. Where we think we have enough space in between the newsletter and the public hearing that they should get the newsletter prior to, when we do the public hearing, so we won't have that problem. The timing of the ballot and timing of the newsletter is just something we don't have control over. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Any other questions? I have a couple quick questions. One is, we have to pay for postage and return postage. Do we have a permit so we don't have to pay on return postage that's not used, or will we automatically pay on all return postage?
Nope, we just literally got an incoming permit this week. Got it in place. So we had to pay a fee for that. Based on the number of ballots, we went with the larger intake versus the smaller one, so it was a little more expensive. But for people who return their ballots, it's going to cost us 65 cents a ballot for it to be returned. If they don't return it, we don't pay for it. So rather than running the meter through and then sending it out and then back, they have to mail it for it to hit our permit number, and then we pay on the permit number.
Perfect. The last thing is, my understanding there's a USPS website that has all of their routes on it. And so you can actually, because there are some 12816 Cambridge zip codes that are in our school district. So, and I don't know that for sure, but that's something that at a NISPA conference at some point was mentioned. So that may be worth investigating if we feel like on the fringes there's a chance we're missing anybody. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, we have a motion on the floor for the appointment of Karen McGregor as Inspector and Teller, Regina Eastman as Teller, and Dave Glover as Teller. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. On to instructional affairs, news and notes. Ms. Vieira.
Can you hear me now? All right. End of year preparations have begun. All my teachers have been working on their end of year rosters, trying to figure out who's going where. We've been receiving some requests from parents for placements, which is always interesting when those come in, because that plays a part in everything. They've been organizing their supply list for next year. Pre-K and kinder packets are out. We're still trying to figure out a day for parents to come in and do the usual, but that's all going to depend on how this is out. So we know that it's a waiting game at this point, but we're still looking toward it and trying to see how that might look. We are working on moving up day for sixth graders. We have some things in the works. It will be happening. I think it's actually going to be kind of cool, but I've been working with the sixth grade teachers on that. Pre-K graduation, we have some ideas for that as well that we've been working on. Some really cute ways of acknowledging our younger students and getting them excited about coming to school full time. So I've been working with Miss Russo on that as well. Miss Lori Stokeham reached out to me this week and is getting everybody psyched up for the Books and Kids Hands program that she does every year, to make sure that our kids over the summer have, that's okay, that our kids over the summer have books to read. So she's been reaching out to teachers, and we're going to work on making sure that that happens as well. We were talking about maybe making it a part of our deliveries with the buses, or just making sure we get those books out to kids that need them. So it's a nice little shout out for her as well. Want to do another shout out. Fourth grade has started virtual classrooms, which this was new for me, and I thought it was just unbelievably cool, where they literally have a page and the kids go in and click on different things in the room, and it accesses lessons, it accesses videos, sing-alongs, all kinds of things. And it actually inspired some of our other teachers. Our second grade teacher, Mandy Riddler, is also setting up a virtual classroom. She loved it so much. So it's kind of spilling over to others, and the kids seem to really like it. Report cards. So report cards for the fourth quarter are definitely a different concept this year. I have been reaching out to other principals in the district, seeing what they're doing at the elementary level. Our report cards as a whole, our BLPT team has been talking about wanting to align them more with the next gen standards, making sure that we are up to date with what we're doing as a school, and that it's reflected in our report cards. So, after a lot of discussions, we've kind of looked at this and said, this is our opportunity to really do this. So, with a lot of conversations with my teachers and trying to figure out what's going to work best, we've kind of come up with how we want to move forward for the fourth quarter. It's not set in stone yet. It's still a work in progress, but we are taking a look at the standards. We were struggling with the concept of giving just a grade for the fourth quarter, where we felt at this point we really needed to reflect on where the kids are, because that's, for us at elementary, it's definitely our focus of what's been taught, what hasn't been taught, what have they been exposed to. So we're really looking at the standards, those power standards, as I like to refer to them. those need to know skills that they need to go to the next level. So that's kind of what we're looking at and scoring those rather than saying, this is your grade and moving on to the next. We really want to take a look at the child as a whole for the whole year and identify those things. So that's kind of the way we're moving with that. Any questions on that? Because I know that's a big move on our part. Yeah, okay. And then the last would be schedules for next year. You know, my big thing is we know that there's going to be gaps. So we want to make sure we're addressing them. So, you know, Dr. Glover will tell you that he has no problem making fun of me and my millions of schedules that I have designed for the just in case concept. But in looking at this and listening to my teachers and talking about how to best serve the needs of all of our students, we've kind of been honing in on a concept for next year that's very similar to what we do now, but really blocking out certain times of the day to make sure that we are supporting all of those gaps. And one of those things is when we look at our RTI model and we look at all of our tiered kids, one of my big pushes for next year, which is one of my building goals, is that RTI model in the mornings and having that half hour that is really focused in on reading. So in doing that and then looking at the rest of the schedule, doing a block schedule where then there is time in the day to focus in on math and supporting those gaps as well. So it is definitely a work in progress and one of my, you know, I call it like 17B schedule because there are so many of them, but it's all kind of leading me to this and having this in place to support all of our kids, those that, you know, might be struggling, with, you know, what they're doing now, what they're doing at home, what they're missing. Just want to make sure that, you know, we're addressing all of them. Does that make sense? Question. Response to intervention is what RTI stands for. So it's all the interventions that we do to make sure we're supporting all the needs of our kids, high, low, all of them. Challenge those that, you know, might be accelerated to support those that might be struggling in specific areas. And it's predominantly data driven. So, you know, those assessments really tell us what it is that we need to hone in on so that we can fill in those gaps and move them up quicker. And we're really going to need to this coming year. So that's my focus.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ms. Vieira. Any questions for Ms. Vieira? All right, Ms. Adams.
Hi, good evening. I think I'm off mute. A few updates on the high school side. So again, as we all know, we're approaching the end of the year and a lot of considerations. One of the challenges we've had now that we know we're in the closure from the physical building for the rest of the year is how do we achieve locker clean out, both in the PE locker rooms, the hallways, the personal lockers in the hallways. So we've sent out communication last week with some end of the year items and considerations for our students. So we have in progress right now, we have cleaned out all of the lockers and organized them by student. We've combined the PE and personal locker, hall locker possessions, and we have a pickup schedule. And we've communicated. We weren't sure if we were going to have a mad rush the first few days, so we do have them roughly outlined by grade level, but it is flexible. So if the assigned day is not working for our families, we've been able to accommodate them and be flexible in that pickup time. Right now, we just completed our progress report, our 5-week period. So our teachers submitted progress reports yesterday. This time, we changed our progress reporting process that was also outlined in the letter last week to families and students, that instead of putting a numerical average, we were using more of a flexible pass Passing with Mastery, which is an average of 85 or above, to recognize the students that are really performing strongly. We want to recognize that, but also try to recognize and be flexible, knowing and understanding that sometimes work is delayed getting in. We're very flexible with our time frame. So we were worried that putting a number average in there might discourage people who might be a little behind in their work but are actively working. And we also, instead of having a no pass or a failing indication, we have an incomplete. We every week, the past few weeks, our faculty's been meeting, our teachers are trying their best to be very thoughtful and considerate of all of the needs of our students. And there are so many needs out there right now. And our families have been doing a good job of communicating with us and the teachers. So we really wanted to have a system that kind of shows that flexibility. We also, in that letter, identified our last day of new instruction. So as everyone's familiar in the high school, usually the last 2 traditional weeks of school are Regents Week, and so there's no new instruction. Those are assessment periods, as well as those periods of time are opportunities for students to make up work and maybe recover a grade that's borderline or failing, to try to improve that. So this year, even though, so we don't have Regents this year, and we're coordinating still, I don't know, we're working on the last actual day of school, but we know the last day of new instruction will be May 29th on that Friday. So we communicated that. And then the time remaining, which will be, we anticipate approximately 2 weeks or so, for students, would give them the opportunity to be working with teachers. Right now, teachers and I are working on communicating with students what work they owe, what they need for their course credit in grades 9 through 12. We do have certain obligations to look at course credit for graduation requirements, which is a little different than K through 8. So really trying to be as flexible as we can and working with students to get those requirements in so they can earn their credit, as well as Regents exemptions. So as soon as we have more information on that, absolute last day, we'll get that out there. But I think we wanted to really put out there those general guidelines. We're communicating that the work is important. It does, it's preparation for next year, but we do have a lot of flexibility in that. So in anticipation, really, and trying to honor the situations of so many, our fourth quarter grades and our final grades will also be more general reference to passing with Mastery, passing, and a no pass, which would indicate no credit. We're looking at calculations. There will be an average calculation for class rank, but that will be separate. And that most likely right now we're kind of working on the details of that and what that might look like. But we feel that that will most likely be weighted and considered with the work from either the first semester or the first 3 quarters. But the intent here is to recognize it and be flexible and for the individual student circumstances that are out there. So we don't know yet about summer school. That we're waiting for some direction from the governor's office in terms of whether or not what would be allowed to recover that credit. Just to be reminded that students who are in Regents courses, in order to receive that exemption of that required Regents exam for the Regents diploma, they must receive course credit. So we're really working hard to communicate as much as possible with students and families so that they understand that this is an opportunity that we really want students to achieve their credit through the end of the year. And they do have through August, through a summer school period, but we're not sure what that will look like. We're hoping, if there's not a summer school, that maybe, there would be some credit recovery, but a lot of times those are online opportunities, and some students are having difficulty, obviously, in our area with that infrastructure and accessibility. So we're trying our best now to work with those students. I'm checking my list. So that's our grading right now. I just wanted to share that last week we had a town hall with our seniors, Dr. Glover, Ms. Perkins, who is our senior advisor, Mr. Zarzicki, our guidance counselor, and a few other teachers who help with graduation, and or Mr. North is also our yearbook advisor. And we felt it was really important to meet and invite the seniors to speak with us. We wanted to give them updates and give them as much information as we have right now. We also wanted to get feedback on some options. We're considering some virtual graduation, online options versus in-person options, and we really wanted to get their feedback from them, and also questions and concerns they might have related to end of the year activities, college applications, all of the things that go into that senior experience and end of year. It is really, it's really hit them hard. We had a great turnout. This is, obviously we all can imagine it's difficult for them that they've kind of lost this experience and joy of that end of the year and that celebration. But on the other hand, I so admire them for their perseverance and being so positive and throwing out ideas. And so it was really a nice meeting, and I think it was productive. I think a lot of our students felt so. What we heard loud and clear was that the preference really was, if at all possible, that they would like an in-person graduation. We talked about there might be social distancing concerns and or which could delay an in-person to later in the summer or into the fall. And a lot of them understood that, but they just really felt that they wanted to be a part of a lot of the traditions of the past and those traditional ceremony. Right now, Dr. Glover and I have, we have a good lead for a drive-in ceremony at Hathaway. And so we're working on getting more information on that. The students really liked that idea. They've heard other schools that are doing it. It's something where we could preserve a lot of our traditions. They might look and feel a little different, but we could really preserve a lot of that ceremony. I have a volunteer from the community who is really expert in AV, who has offered assistance with that. The one piece that we're still waiting for is the governor's office has basically put out that they're going to give guidance related to graduation ceremonies. And we're waiting for that guidance. Dr. Glover might be able to give us an update on the timing of that. I think it's my understanding it's within the next 2 weeks. And so we're not going to formally put out plans until we're sure that we're compliant with those guidelines, but that is the direction. We have a direction that we could possibly go in. So we're hoping to be able to pursue that. We're going to start planning and get things in motion, and then hopefully we can formally release that as soon as maybe the governor will release the guidelines sooner. So a few other things we're working on. The students really wanted that traditional. We offered to get them student web pages where they could kind of like an electronic yearbook where they can sign and share messages with each other in lieu of the yearbook signing, and they really want those handwritten messages. So they shared some ideas, which were some very good ideas that we have for yearbook signing. We just need to make sure that we don't know when the yearbooks are coming. Obviously, everyone knows that delivery of non-essential items is somewhat delayed. We don't have an indication they're delayed, but until we know when they are going to arrive, we don't have a specific plan, but we have a few ideas for that. Some people may be wondering about that traditional class photo. We're working, we have our photographer that we work with is offered to, we have, it's not going to be exactly the same, but since we can't put them all in a group, we're going to take individual cap and gown photos of all our students, and we feel that we can put together a very nice class photo, and it won't be the same or traditional as the others, but I think maybe rightly so that it'll be more special really to mark the significance of the occasion this year. And finally, lawn signs. Our lawn signs are done, and we are planning our parade tomorrow. So we will be delivering out. We have a group of faculty and staff We're going to be delivering the signs tomorrow. We've contacted the students directly and parents to let them know of the kind of the range of time we'll be out. So if you're in the community, you hear a lot of tooting of horns and cheering. That's what we're doing. We wanted to really make it special. The signs were made with love, and everybody really wants to go out and just give a cheer. So we're pretty excited about that. And it should be a nice day for it. So that's our plan for tomorrow. So I think, you know, we really just, for our seniors and senior families out there, we recognize really the heartache and the disappointment, but we're going to try our best to really make it special. So, and maybe I think along the way, create some new traditions. So I think, I know that was long. I think that's all I had on my list. So if there's any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Adams. Any questions from the board for Ms. Adams? All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Glover.
Thank you. I think the phrase, well, here in a couple of weeks is becoming a staple because everything seems to be from the state is that we'll hear in a couple of weeks. So we're supposed to hear in a couple of weeks about the budget issue. Well, that was about a month ago. And now we're not expecting anything till June. This Friday, the school superintendents in the region, we meet regularly just to kind of keep abreast of things that are going on and share kind of common kind of battle planning, if you will, through issues. And we were meeting with the public health officials from the counties from the Wichita-BOCES. And in that conversation, we started talking about graduations, and the public health folks said, oh, the governor's going to have guidance on that in a couple of weeks, which not a superintendent knew about. The Department of Ed, I guess, didn't know about. So here we're, you know, and some school districts have already announced this is what they're going to do. And then we hear that there's guidance going to come from the state about graduations. Right now, the concept of graduations does not have the public health support in our respective counties to there. I have a meeting tomorrow that will be giving us state ed's perspective on large group gatherings and graduations and what those could look like. And, you know, then it's the governor who really is in the driver's seat for all of this and what he believes we can do or can't do for what graduation may or may not look like. In the end, it's student safety and community safety that comes first. That's paramount. I have to put on my Grinch hat here a little bit as we're going to plan like it's going to happen, but we have to be prepared that graduations may end up having to be delayed or may not be able to be done in person based on whatever the state tells us. Like I said, that's new information literally from 72 hours ago. That's even in the light of we're reopening. But even in the reopening, large groups, the CDC recommendations, anything at 250 or larger for a group size should be canceled. And graduation would fit into that. We would barely fit into that, I think. But still group sizes of 10 or more are really should still be around 10, which still put us in a bit of a predicament. That's where the drive-in solution is pretty creative because you keep everyone contained in their smaller groups while you're still able to do something together. So the graduation is still a wait and see based on what the state tells us for guidance, and we will move forward from there. The other part we're waiting on the state for guidance on is what the end of the year really looks like. The last executive order told us that the end of the schools would be closed to the end of the school year and did not define what the end of the school year is. So in that, it doesn't mean it's, when we've hit our 180 student instructional days, or is it the end of June? And then what does that mean for the other things we're responsible for outside of student instruction? Right now, general consensus is once we hit our student hours, our 180 days, that would be when our continuation of instruction would end. And when the continuation of instruction ends, that would end the other requirements as well, which would be the community feed as well as the daycare pieces. So we are looking at what our end would look like. It is going to be a little earlier than we would be traditionally. The end of school originally was the 26th of June. We don't have a set date yet, but it's likely to be sometime in the week of June the 15th when we're looking for that official last day of school. Still working with our data folks on how many hours we have in, because we have an hour requirement we have to hit. We have the minimum days of instruction we have to worry about, plus remaining within our contractual boundaries. So still a lot of work going on into that area. But we are hoping to get guidance here in a couple of weeks to be able to tell us what that exactly means. From there, it's really looking at what's the summer look like and what does next school year look like. Already in serious conversations about those. I am having some conversations with both Ms. Carey and with some community folks about maintaining a feeding program over the summer. And if we did, what that would look like, still in kind of some planning stages and how we might be able to do that. So stay tuned for more news, but we're still talking about what feeding would look like. Some feedback I'm getting from some of our community folks is that the feeding piece has been an integral part for family stability and food stability in the community. We do have the waiver for the summer school feeding as part of our federal program. Those are reimbursable meals. So that may be something we look to try to continue, even though we're going through the middle of a building project at the same time. Did have a conversation with our construction manager, and he basically said, if we need to make it happen, we can make something happen. So plans are in the place. When we have more details and have some better clearance or ideas to what we need to do, we will get more information out and forward. With that, and I just got to kind of compliment the principals and the teachers for, this has been a very difficult time period, and there isn't anything solid to stand on. This isn't building the plane as it flies. This is making things happen while we're in free fall. And so we've been kind of held out every 2 weeks as to what's going on, and we've all managed it, and they've managed it very well and come up through some very difficult decisions that is fair and I think in the best interest of kids. We're not done yet to get there, but the Salem family is holding together well, and I anticipate we'll continue to do that right on through the end of the school year and right on into next year as we keep focusing on the needs of our students and community. With that, I don't have anything else to share unless you have any questions.
Any questions for the superintendent? I don't have a question, just and everything that I've seen from epidemiologists who have studied this pandemic and previous pandemics is that there's likely to be a second wave. And I think that there's a real chance that that we could be impacted in the fall, that there's going to be, I know already the California state systems, I think, as I mentioned at the last meeting, is those students will not be in class in the fall. So, and I guess just keeping that in the back of our minds as far as programming, but also because we're talking about budget, the budget piece of that. So.
Yeah, it's, there's some of our regional colleges are already, putting out there that they aren't opening with students in August. That they're going to push off till October. I agree with you. At some point this fall, we will. If we end up in another closure again within this calendar year, it would not surprise me. Whether we start in September or not, I don't know what that is. If we start in September, it wouldn't surprise me if we were off again for another closure sometime before Thanksgiving for a period of time. It just depends on, we all know when school starts, everyone gets the beginning of school cold. That usually is right around October because we've all gotten back together. So after everything, we get all to, we get back together, we catch this cold, we get over that cold, and we move forward. Unfortunately, now it's not just a cold to worry about with COVID. So we can anticipate needing to have some type of plan, not only to how we maintain the social distancing piece when we do come back, and we've kind of thrown around a couple ideas along with Karen's 374 schedules, but also with what happens when we end up having shorter to extended breaks during next school year to maintain instruction in a more structured way now that we know it possibly would be coming.
Right, and plus we'll have a lot more practice this next time than we did the current time. So. Excellent. Any other questions for Dr. Glover? All right. Well, thank you very much for your reports. Moving on.
But I'm sorry to
Go
interrupt.
ahead.
Can I share
Go
one
ahead,
more?
Julie.
I put in the chat, one more news item. My apologies. I didn't turn the page. I did want to just share with you, we had an amazing turnout. It was AP exam week. A lot of perseverance from our approximately, I think it's 30 students who took AP exams over the past 2 weeks online. They revised the exam to try to accommodate the not having the full instructional period. A lot of our students have overcome a lot of technical challenges. I know some of them, we're not necessarily taking them in the most ideal settings. And I really just, I wanted to say, the teachers and I are so proud of them. We have 8 AP courses, and there were over 50 exams administered. So I wanted to just really commend the students for their perseverance, and our teachers who did an amazing job to prepare them and really look out for them, and found them places to take the exams and help them with their devices. And Mr. Zarzicki, that everybody just pulled together. And I apologize that I forgot to mention it earlier, but I just couldn't go without really mentioning and showing appreciation for all of that hard work. So thank you for letting me interrupt.
No problem. Thank you for interrupting, and thanks everybody for your reports and all your hard work during this, and to the administrative team and to all the everybody in the school who's worked through this. Moving on to the board conference reports. I don't know if anybody has anything other than there was a webinar last week, that NISPA webinar on the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, that spoke to social emotional learning and sort of creating an environment where that is more possible. So, and I think it's archived for any board members who wanted to see that. Board committee report. I think we're going to hear from the policy committee first.
Dr. Glover, Mary, and I met virtually on May 14th, and we did cover quite a bit of ground at that time. There was a request from the safety committee to incorporate language that would allow for window coverings in lockdown situations. It is not, without that language, you can't use those coverings. So Dr. Glover is going to be looking at how to best go forward. We have a choice. We might be able to add it to our current policy of school safety plans, or because it's unique to the school, it might be better if we had our own standalone policy that would address that. So there'll be more to come on that. We talked about 2 new policies that we'll be taking a look at for a first read, that are, one of them, the first one comes because of the COVID pandemic, and it has to do with using grant funds under extraordinary circumstances. And that's just so that the money can be expended to pay salaries in this situation. And the next one is something that's been ongoing, and it has to do with protection of student data. And so that it's a very extensive policy, and it does identify that we will need a data protection officer. So that's on the agenda for the first read. In coming along with that, it's not on the agenda tonight, but we do have a policy for student data breaches that will become redundant when we enact the new policy for protection of their data. So when that occurs, we have the option of deleting that old, the current policy that we have, 7243. We did talk about adding specific language to the policy for surveillance cameras that would only be school authorized cameras, can be used anywhere on the school property. So Dr. Glover will be looking at some language for that, and we'll be talking about that at our next meeting. And then we did talk about some things that were pending. In our next meeting, we'll be talking about language for restorative practices included into the code of conduct. We did talk about our exit interview policy, and one of the things that was a question as to who would actually be conducting the exit interviews. And the school attorney did say that to avoid any conflicts, that we should try to stay out of the, say, the chain of command, so to speak, so that the person who is involved in evaluation and supervision is not the person who would be conducting the exit interview. So say for somebody who was on the academic side, it was recommended that the business manager might be somebody who would be appropriate to have that. And then if somebody who fell under the supervision of the business manager, another administrator, principal would be able to conduct that interview. So the language that's in the policy tonight does reflect that it would come out of the superintendent's office, but that's something that we might want to discuss just to add more clarity to who would be conducting the interviews, so that it would not be in question. So, and then we just have we targeted some additional areas of conversation for our next meeting, which will be June 18th.
Excellent. Thank you, Ann. Any questions for Ann on the policy? Anything except for the policies will come back up under policy review. So we can just talk about those there. All right. Jackie, anything on the communications committee?
No, not yet. I'm trying to get a hold of everybody. It's kind of been playing a tag and trying to get everybody together. So I'll keep you updated.
Excellent. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Capital project update.
Okay, so on the capital project, we are underway. For those who are interested on the agenda, there is a file called Initial Work for May 2020. Just some basic pictures of some of the initial work that's going on. You can see the boys' locker room without anything in it. Literally, everything's ripped out of that area. Behind the school, the ramp and the stairs to go into the back of the high school are gone. There is now a hole in its place as they begin the work on the back part of the work there. And just a couple pictures to see kind of the beginnings of the clearing out and the work that's getting started. The closure has allowed us to get into some spaces where we might not have been able to get into before. So they're working on, we're balancing we're still in operations and still have things to do against where can we take advantage of this time to get some more of the project work in and come together. Sometime next week, we expect more of the site work to start happening. So very soon, our basketball court and our tennis court will be removed, and our playground will be removed too there. So we are underway in the project. Meetings are happening every other week. Things are moving relatively smoothly at the beginning. Working on a couple kinks that you work out in the beginning of any project, but things so far are moving well. But to that also, as part of our conversation here about the project, is the playground. So attached to the agenda here are the feedback that we've gotten from different folks. Thanks to Ms. Lubick, who did some coordination and got some ideas from students. So those student ideas are posted, set to the website. Also got a couple different ideas from a couple other different folks, a couple board members and a couple others, and they are all posted currently to that site. Remember, we have a 5-week lead to get there, or we need to pick a color. So we need to get that work done so we can get that order in, so we can get the materials here in time so we can stay on schedule with our playground for next year.
So say again the 5-week lead time with the goal of that being, when does that 5 weeks end?
The 5 weeks starts after we submit our order. So the playground is slated to be in the ground prior to next school year. It's the end of May now. I don't know how long of an installation time it is, but you're talking at this point, if we were to decide tonight, we're looking probably right at the end of June, early July to have the materials here and then whatever it would take for installation time to get the playground.
So we really need to make a decision.
Or we really need to make a choice.
Yeah.
But the generator and all that digging and removing, right, of will be done because that has to be done first.
Yeah, so the playground coming up next week clears the way for the digging for the generator work to start.
So what are board members' perspectives on any of the examples that were provided?
I can.
I don't know, mine wasn't posted, but
I can, your link it's on a separate sheet. I can show you the different options if you'd like to see them.
let's just do it. I mean, the ones that Bob sent us were nice. I'm afraid that if we go with that beige color on slides and things, that I think they're just gonna look worn and used much sooner than if we go with a darker color on those things. Just. It also kind of takes away from the original. We had talked about purple and the dark gray.
Right. I think at some point I thought we came close to consensus on
Yeah, that
sort
was
of some natural colors. And
The one you're seeing is Heidi's. Is that right, Heidi? Did I guess right?
Yeah.
You know, so that's,
I tried to add some primary colors to the.
there.
the HDPE is purple on that one.
Yes.
It's purple, yes.
You know, I was a big advocate for going purple, but after looking at the schemes that they had established already, and with our building, I don't think we have to. I was leaning towards like the rainforest, so the greens, the browns, you know, more the neutral, and I really like the patriotic color scheme that they have as well.
Remember the name of the patriotic one, Jackie?
Patriotic, I think.
Patriotic, I think that's
Oh.
the name of it.
Oh, creative name. Okay, got it. I don't remember it, obviously. It's-
Palettes. That's one of the pre-prepared palettes.
Okay.
Well, and I think the last one in the large grouping that Bob had sent us with the green and the red and the blue, I think that puts out a lot of the primary colors anyways that we had talked about.
Is that PDF? There were 3 or 4 different general.
Yeah.
And I liked actually being able on the website to put that a background behind it, just so you get a little bit of a sense of what it might look like.
Lost you.
Okay. That did not work as planned. Hold on. Seems to be the theme tonight when it comes to, the link isn't working right. Here we go. You should see it now.
So if you scroll down to the last one, it has like the blue, the red, the green, the gray.
That one.
Yeah.
So that is my writing. That was my interpretation of acceptable, which could be very different from other people's. I just like the non-electric green.
Yeah, no, I think that works with the primary colors, which we had kind of talked about before.
Can you scroll up through those again, Dave? It was right up above that purple and champagne one. So one more, no, maybe that one. That's pretty close to the patriotic. It's the only difference I think is that the metal railings are red instead of white in that one.
Could we do the patriotic with the blue slides and roof and then maybe the white color somewhere else?
Yeah, it's too bad that that champagne is so light.
Yeah, too bad we couldn't do like the dark gray there.
We can Probably start with the palette colors and then adjust on those, so any of it's customizable. I mean, we've been putting together custom things for a bit.
I'm not a fan of the light color on the slides. I don't know. I feel like it's gonna show dirt, mold, mildew, whatever.
And that's the,
I don't mind that one either. That one's not bad.
Yeah, I kind of like those green ones. I did try with some blue slides, but the blue just seemed a little bit loud.
The blue color on the screen is worse than the actual blue would show up, I think. That's my feeling. Something with the themes, because remember there was a jungle theme, there was a.
yeah, I'm looking for that now a little bit.
It's not in the color palette areas.
I'm going to suggest we consider going through the rest of our meeting, and then if people are interested in watching us wrangle with this at the end. Not that it's not exciting. Is that are we have unanimous consent on switching that up to do that at the end so we can go through everything else?
Yep.
Do you have other pieces to the capital project update, Dave?
Nope, not at this time.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I don't want to kick that can too far down the road, but I think that if we could get through everything else, and then anybody who wants to stay, and in fact, we might do that after public comment, get a little bit of public comment on it as well. Okay. Moving on to the next order of business, which is personnel. Do we have a motion to approve the appointment of Kathy Payne as a substitute teacher?
So moved.
Motion by Heidi. Second by Jackie. Any discussion? I could have put those two together, but Kathy was on here before, so I like anytime anybody's in a meeting and they're in a motion, I like to keep that as a separate motion. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Personnel B, do we have a motion to accept the resignation of Pat Brown, assistant head mechanic, for the purpose of retirement?
So moved.
Motion by Jackie.
Second.
Second by Heidi. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to new business. Scholarship approval. Do we have a motion to approve the establishment of the Robert A. Bruins Scholarship?
So moved.
Motion by Mary.
Second.
Second by
Got
Ann.
it.
Any discussion? Quick question: how many scholarships or awards does this bring us to for graduation night?
I am not sure. Karen, any ideas? For Julie?
You were muted, Karen, when you spoke.
I don't have the exact number. What we've been doing is, Mrs. Patrick and Mrs. LeBlanc have actually been, have made, another contact with all of our providers, of scholarships, just to confirm, based on the current economic situation, that those would still be, offered this year. And so actually just part of that process is that's still going on. I think we're giving them until next week to reply, and then we should have an exact number. And our awards, our selection, we have our selection process that we have with our faculty staff committee that we have for the first week of June. My apologies. I can send that number to Dr. Clover, approximately what we anticipate, but it will depend on the replies, the hard number, but I could send that to him if you would like to forward to you.
Yeah, I'd be curious. So, but nope, thank you very much. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the establishment of the Robert A. Bruin Scholarship? Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to policy review. First read of policy 5676, privacy and security for student data and teacher and principal data. Do we have a motion to accept the first read of said policy?
So moved.
Motion by Heidi,
Seconded.
second by Ann. Any discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. To review B, first read of 5552, use of Department of Education grant funds during extraordinary circumstances. Do we have a motion to approve the first read of policy 5552?
So moved.
We have a motion by Jackie. Second?
Second.
Second by Ann. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Do we have a motion to approve the first read of policy 6460, exit interviews?
So moved.
Motion by Jackie.
Heidi.
Heidi, sorry. By Heidi.
Second.
Second by Jackie, I think. Any discussion?
And I'll jump in here because I'm not sure how that version of the policy got on there, because Ann had raised the question to me in an email earlier about the change in the policy language. And I went to the website and I pulled up the policy from the board agenda, and it gave me a different policy than what is listed currently. So we were having some problems with this over the weekend, so I'm not sure why that policy came up into place. And the difference in the policy listed is that it takes the superintendent and the board out of kind of that initial conversation, as Ann had alluded to before. So in the conversations with the committee, it would be the business manager, and I thought about doing the instructional personnel. That way principals weren't involved in the line conversation for the any exit interview. And then I think the question, Ann, where we were was, at that point, do we want, if it's a supervisory person, and that would fall underneath the business manager, is that the business manager would take and give the business manager the authority to make those determinations? Or does the board want to set that a principal would go into there? There's advantages to both, I think. For the business manager to have the responsibility is just, for expediency purposes. I think on the other side of that coin, for the board to have that kind of already laid out takes away the question of, well, why did I do my exit interview with this principal and not this principal, especially in the case if it's a termination that ends up being there. I think that was our main point of conversation when it came to that policy piece. But I'll make sure I'll get that up.
For clarity, then, what is the recommendation of the policy committee?
We had talked to the response that came back from the attorney. He said it could be done, but he recommended that the board and say the superintendent stay away from the exit interviews, that it be somebody that is outside of that particular chain of command and not in a direct supervisory or would have the ability to, observe the person's job effectiveness. So we were trying to find somebody who was outside of that chain of command link. So for the academic program side, the business manager made sense because, in that line of, it would be somebody who would be independent. But then when you have the business manager has supervision over the cafeteria, the bus garage, buildings and grounds. Karen, is there any other areas?
Somebody who's not.
Right, not in that academic programming component. So does leave us with limited choices as far as, in the administrative cabinet, if we want to keep the superintendent separate from these exit interviews so that we don't interrupt that chain of command. So that would leave the two principals. But we also talked about having the business manager or their designee be the person to do it. So, we bounced around a couple of ideas.
So the recommendation is different than what was in the policy that was attached.
Yes.
So I'm going to suggest that we postpone this because we're not going to want to approve the first reading of a policy that's different than what the policy committee actually recommends. So do we have does that, I guess do we have a motion to postpone until our next regularly scheduled meeting? Who is the motion by?
Jackie.
Motion by Jackie. Do we have a second? Second by Heidi. Any discussion on that postponement? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0.
So the board knows I will have it listed as an updated in this agenda to where it is. So if folks wanted to read it, it will still be attached to this agenda, and I'll make sure you get that copy on that. Not sure how that happened.
Moving on, next order of business, topics for future board meetings. Does anybody have any? I would like us to the continuing to, even after we get back to meeting in person and no longer meet virtually, if videotaping those meetings and making that video available. So we could have some discussion. I don't want to have it right now, but just what board members' thoughts are on that.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I did think after our policy committee, I didn't ask Dr. Glover if that was taped. I don't know. Did you capture that, Dr. Glover?
Nope, that one was not captured.
Okay, I don't, if we do our regular meetings, should we do our committee meetings as well? I mean, that might be something to add to that conversation.
Yes is the answer to that. For currently, in the future, there's still a conversation, but currently, yes, that is yes.
Right, I think for open meetings ultimately, but yeah, I think that just by the number of people who are able to attend in settings like this, I think that. So anyway, we can have that discussion. I don't want to get into that discussion now, but any other topics for future board meetings?
I was just going to add to that, Bob, about do we want to consider, like, I don't know how long this is going to last, but like quarterly or, actually meeting in person? If we do our social, not with everybody, not open to the public, but.
Yeah, and I think that's something we can, I don't think we need to wait to the next meeting to.
Yeah.
Some of that I think will depend on probably on some guidance, but also I know there are other school boards that have begun to meet in person, socially distanced. So I think that as long as we notice those meetings properly, then go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, we actually have, I believe, the space and the technology available that if we were to meet in person, that we could still video those meetings live. And record them the same way we do now. I think you'd lose the interaction you do in our current setting with for the folks who are part of it. Folks would be able to see what's going on. But if we used our distance learning room, or that space that has the cameras where it could tape the whole thing, all the meetings going on into place. And there's enough space in there to keep everyone separated from each other to allow that to happen. So I think that's something that is within the realm of possibilities for us.
Perfect. Any other topics for future board meetings? All right, we're going to move on to public audience then. And then we'll go back.
Maybe you just ask people, since there's a large number of call-ins, to just ask to be unmuted, like on the chat box. So then it might make it easier.
Good idea. Although all users are still not going to be able to do that. So I think anybody who can chat in probably can also unmute themselves. But I think if somebody's just straight calling in, I don't think they can probably do either. So at this point, if there's any public comment, anyone who is able to unmute themselves can unmute themselves, and hopefully not all do it at exactly the same time and be recognized. And I am going to, as we wait, unmute the call-in folks. And I think that is correct. Is that correct, Amy or Dave, that these call-in users aren't going to have any way to either unmute themselves or chat?
I believe there is a way when they call in, there's a series of instructions that they're given that says that, you know, if you hit a certain key.
*6.
Yeah.
To meet, you just hit *6 and then you unmute yourself. But so I mean, I would assume it's the same.
*6. So I have them all unmuted.
No, I don't know if it's the same keys, but I'm assuming there's
same. Yep. I assume anybody who has their name, whose name I can see, would then be capable, they could unmute themselves.
Yes. Have that capability.
All these people and no public comment. I'm going to have to start calling on individuals again then.
Hi, board.
Hi, Anna. Go ahead. Thank you very much.
I just have things I would like to say. First of all, I would like to say I appreciate the board's decision to consider the budget this year in a more positive aspect, maybe what was discussed last week. So I just wanted to say thank you. I think that's the right decision. And I know it can be still changed depending on what the state says, but I think, thank you.
Well, thank you for your comment.
Less specific with that. When you talked about the playground, whatever color choice you go with, once you start to break ground, and I know you have plans set in place, I would definitely like you to keep in mind the placement of it and how that affects the building as a whole. A little bit too close to the high school classrooms can be very distracting. And I know there are limitations with that, and I'm sure you will take that in consideration with the project managers.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much thank you for your comment. Any other public comment? All right, hearing none. We will go back to the playground color discussion.
Dave, that's if you go under like the shopping tools and go to color palettes, you can see all the different choices and the patriotic and the different types come in.
Do you have that link up that you could just email it to me?
Let's see if I can send it.
Save us a couple minutes from the search.
Yep. Problem is I've got it up on a Chromebook beside me and not on my main computer. So let's see.
Was that? That's the color wizard, or what exactly were you?
So you go under the shopping tools and it's under colors and palettes over to the left side. The first choice You click on that and then you just scroll down and they're all there.
Got it.
So there's Bayou, Jungle, Malibu, Rainforest, Atlantic. It's all different. The patriotic one is down towards the bottom.
Here, let me share my screen.
Isn't bad.
Can you see it?
Yep.
That color scheme right there?
Yeah. See, I think that the slides on the patriotic one are darker than that really champagne color.
At least look at in that picture, don't they?
What was that?
They look darker in this picture.
Yes. Even the one down below it with the yellow and the red and the blue, I don't.
But I think that patriotic is not our, right? That's not the Mountain Vista or whatever.
But I think, can you use that scheme with the Mountain Vista?
You can, but I think that ends up being the champagne, not, that looks like a darker gray. And if you get the Mountain Vista scheme and then pull up the patriotic, or the Mountain Vista play set and then pull up the patriotic, it ends up being champagne, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Actually, it's saying champagne there. That may just be the, right, that actually is saying that it's champagne. So it does look darker, but.
It just looks darker, yeah.
I'll ask our rep to put it together with this color scheme and see what it looks like.
If you just Google Color Wizard game time, then it takes you right to the Color Wizard. And then if you go to select colors, actually, yeah, just like you had said before, Dave, you go down and select the structure, which is the Mountain Vista, and then go up to colors, select colors, and on the left go to palettes and patriotic, which is actually up near the top then, and then you see the lighter champagne. Because yeah, that darker gray looks great.
I like the darker. I would even like if it was even gray or whatever. I don't mind the red and blue.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, see, I think that's too light. I don't know. Just my thoughts.
Yeah, I kind of like that. I'd switch the that white metal railing to the red just because I was for similar concerns about the lightness. I mean, that white is very light.
Mm-hmm.
The enhanced patriotic. Yeah, and then you can just go right to that and go to metal and actually, yeah, not the uprights because uprights are already red. But if you go to go to select color metal and then go down and select red.
I think the one that you did with the red and the blue and the green.
Actually, I guess I went more of the burgundy than the red.
Yeah.
Red's a little.
I guess I just don't like the colors of the light beige. I just think it's going to be looking grungy very quick. I don't know. Yeah, I don't mind the one that you did with the green plastics. I think looks fine. The bottom one that Bob had shown us before.
With that sky blue metal railing.
There's that one, and then there's the really last one, which was like the dark blue, the red, and the green. Either of those, I think, is. I mean, even the beige with the green slides is better, I think. Just the plastics are going to look dingy quick.
So that one, a couple of those are pretty similar, but that one actually has, so it's got the champagne metal railing and then the gray posts.
Yeah.
That's about as exciting as my bright colors get, is 2 different shades of gray. Electric green, but.
Yeah. Does anybody else have thoughts?
Ann or Mary?
I do think that I would prefer that we stay away from the really screaming colors. We were driving the other day, we went by one that was orange and blue, and you could see that for miles coming and going. I do like the more the darker colors. The only question I ask is, does the plastic get hot in the summer?
Yes.
The darker colors would get hotter? They'll hold the heat?
I think, I think if it's hot enough, any of the plastics heat up.
Okay.
Not like the old metal slides, though. I mean, those are.
No.
Those will burn you.
I can ask him to do the patriotic one just to see what it looks like. I'll talk to him about that, about what does that champagne really look like, because in different pictures it looks different.
Yeah.
Some of those pictures it looks, darker, whereas some of the renderings we've had it's lighter. He's had experience in actually dealing with the material and the equipment, so he should have a better idea what that really looks like.
Yeah.
To there.
And I guess also I'd be interested in the, if what other schools' experiences are through them of those lighter colors. I mean, I think that at one point I mentioned, like with vehicles or floors, lighter colors actually can show less dirt at times. But I think that if I kind of share that, it looks a little too light to me. Share those, or I don't.
Meeting, making a decision, that's another 5 weeks out before we get this, right? Is that going to push it back too far?
In the end, I would argue that this isn't, business of the district necessarily that would fall under having to go to, we don't have to vote on what the colors are. We just need to know, what are we happy with in basics, and then move forward with it. I can get these renderings to you and feedback for general direction of where we need to go, and then we can make it happen.
Okay, that's fine. I just didn't want to push it back too far. That was going to happen.
Yeah. No, it's when we're done tonight, I'm going to take this information for the playground and send it right off to him, because I have an email from him this afternoon for this is the next.
Patriotic would allow you to put gray slides or something. I don't know. I guess gray wasn't really.
I mean, I like it in that sample they give. I know it's not the structure that is ours, but
And it says it's champagne, but it's so dark. It looks dark.
so
Yeah, and that's where I'm questioning is which version of champagne is it? Because is it the darker version or is it the lighter version that we've seen? Just to have a better feel for what that is.
Being a proponent of the patriotic, what is your take on the railing color?
are you talking to me?
Yes.
Definitely not the white. They have a gray for metal that I think fits in nicely
Yeah, I agree.
with I think is it the red uprights?
Red or burgundy. I think it's a dark.
Burgundy.
Right, yeah, and then the dark blue for the flooring and.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea, Jackie.
Yeah, that looks nice. That would look nice.
Okay, burgundy handrails for white handrails. Got it.
Nope, gray.
Handrails, I think.
Got it. I'm crossing out burgundy and I'm writing gray down.
Burgundy uprights. Burgundy uprights.
Got it. Burgundy uprights. Gray handrails.
Do you suppose this company gets this many questions and remakes for everybody's playgrounds, or just ours?
He didn't give me a direct answer.
I'm sure.
It's just this is the most visible, so I fear that we just need to be cautious. So, I know you're not going to please everybody, but try to make it look tasteful and fun and fit in.
Yes. Yep.
Agreed. Perfect. Any other last comments on the playground? All right, boy, we only lost about 9 people, I think, going in on the playground discussion. Do we have a motion to go into executive session for the discussion of Dr. Glover? You can.
It's for
I
personnel
don't see him.
history, negotiations, and am I muted?
Can't see you, but I can hear you.
I can see you and hear you.
Okay. Negotiations and particular history of persons or personnel.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Heidi,
Seconded?
second by Ann. Any discussion?
Second.
Was there discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. No anticipated, correct?
Anticipated. Board, I need you to hold here for a second because we're going to try to keep this meeting open. Going to executive to have 2 sessions open at the same time in the event we come back like we did in the last meeting. I'm working it off 2 devices and I'm not sure how it's going to work.
Okay.
So I'm just the host now, Dave.
What was your thought, Jackie?
I just need to use the restroom. So, unfortunately, I'm not in like a home or a building.
I'm across the street in Jacko's.
No.
I can socially distance myself, and there's a bathroom right here.
Thanks, Bob.
Poor Jackie.
Yeah.
Turn off my camera.
Julie, the regular meeting's over.
Okay, it's going to let me do it. The other meeting is open for board members.
So Dr. Glover, I didn't get the links for the other day when we had to do this before. So do I just X myself? I don't know how to get from one to the other.
I need to send it to you, Ann, so hold on one second. So I'll send it to your email.
So are we staying in this meeting and somehow opening another?
Yeah, I sent you I forwarded everybody a link to an executive session.
Right, I got that, but how do you can still leave this open and go into another one? Okay.
I have to keep this open for me because I'm the host of the session.
Gotcha.
You couldn't go
So-
to the other one until I had it open, which I just.
Okay.
So I will send you an email that gets you the executive session information.
It's not the one from the other day that you sent?
Yes, it is. But Ann said.
Okay, I did get that. I just wasn't able to do it the last time because I didn't get 2 invitations. So do I just close out of this one?
You close out.
I don't leave it open.
You can close out of this one, then click the link for the executive session one and it'll bring you into a new meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
versus like the pool space and getting in there. It's like, oh my God. So on the report, I have like 75% of the house is on crawl space. I could only access 25% of it. I wasn't going in that little tiny.
Yeah, I thought that it was tomorrow, but it's tonight. That should be done already.